the music still plays on, where you are now, that's the only moment to my knowledge that you are a manifestation inside Gordon's head. How does it feel different by being the person versus the memory manifestation?
Well, I don't play it as a memory manifestation, that's his stuff. I just play it as a mother who is trying to cope with the fact that her life is not what she thought it would be. And, you know, that's where I go with it.
You talked about a little bit in one of the interviews, talk about the kind of beautiful structure Joe Clark, our wonderful director, gave you for Throw 'Em Out.
Oh, well, he didn't. So he just let me be. So
Hi, brother. Hi, Mary.
He just let me be so that I don't have. It's not specific books on specific things. So it was easier for me to just do it the way, you know. I'm not answering these questions very well. Sorry.
Sorry. Fine. Hi, Andy. Hi, Darrell. Talk to me. Andy, we talked to Mary about being a very linear character. How do you approach being Mr. Bungie, where you're kind of always there and popping up moments? Like, how do you approach it as an actor and tell that kind of wicked story of the frog?
Right, yeah. Well, it's a different kind of character because he's mostly imaginary. And so the linearity of it is a little harder to find. But I always think that, like, whenever Gordon is when he's sort of descending, that's when his boss comes out. And his boss reminds him that he's bad at his job and things. And I actually don't think that Bungie is who Gordon says that he is. He's just this kind of specter. And Gordon sort of casts him as this devil that comes in to harass him.
I'm just saying hi, my whole family's here, so I can't stay, but I just wanted to say hi and thank you all for coming to the show.
So then, Andy, who is the real Mr. Bungie then? Have you thought about, like...
Oh, the real Mr. Bungie is the guy who's on the subway train during change. And he's wearing a blazer and a little hat, and he works for PBS. And he's got a little on his jacket. And this is actually true. There's little frog buttons, and he's got a little whatever this thing is called in his lapel. He's got a little frog that's peeking out. So he's like always selling, but he's like a PBS show. I think he's been doing it for 40 years.
PBS show. So for Roger, how does being the version in Gordon's head versus the actual person's life, how does that work for you when you're kind of sailing through the show?
You know, I like to think of it as two different ways of being grounded, like knowing who Gordon is and how Roger presents to him, I think is really important when I'm doing sailing, because I like to think of Roger at his best in sailing. And throughout the show, as we see a bit more of, you know, things happening, he gets sick, and we start to understand that things are unfolding in a way that maybe Roger hasn't really had a lot of control over. I think he starts to break that wall down a little bit. So I think for me, mostly it's just knowing where I'm at and what I'm doing at that time and knowing how I exist in Gordon's mind at that time.
And how do you, then when you go into the dream sequence, how did Joe approach that? The brain dead sequence with all of you, because that's a tricky moment.
Well, that was more Chloe, wasn't it?
Chloe is the choreographer.
I don't know, I'm not in it, so I can't.
Oh. Well, I think it's just like, I think of it as like, so the way he had explained it to us is this is literally every character that, with the exception of Weather, that we have seen up until this point in the most heightened version in Gordon's brain as he, you know, is brain dead. And so what we've done is we've taken these characters that we've sat with for the past, like, you know, 80 minutes, and we've really kind of peaked them to this cartoonish, like, dreamscape. I like to think of it as like Nightmare on Elm Street, the very last one that was super, super funny and not scary at all. I like to think of it as that. That's how I approach it.
Bill Finn compared to Nightmare on Elm Street. That'll be his next project.
It could be about it.
Final question before we open it up a bit. Talk about putting Anytime back in. So the song Anytime was cut well before it was ever on stage. And when we found out from VADIM FEICHTNER, our amazing musical director, whose head is no longer here, that it was in, and asked Bill if we could put it back in. It was kind of a magical moment because you actually hear the underscore of Anytime and the underscore of most of the show when you really start to listen. What was that like to be kind of given that gift?
It is a gift. It is a gift. Well, I knew Anytime before, and I thought, oh my God, this is an amazing song that I've always wanted to sing, and I didn't know they were going to put it back into the show. And when they did, I thought, this is such a good way to connect. This is such a good way to like fully establish that relationship and to explore more what it means to be in love with someone, you know, fiercely and ferociously. So when they added it back in, I thought, like, this is just a really good moment for me to stay even more grounded and connect more to Gordon/Adam. And it's a beautiful, beautiful song, and I feel very, very, very blessed to be able to sing it and try to do it well. And yeah.
Now
For
it
the
feels like
first time in this show. For the first time.
It was in for a minute in the original production, and then it was cut.
and now it feels like it should have always been there. Because it's musically always been there.
Yeah,
It's been musically sprinkled everywhere.
Yeah, it's really good.
So we're gonna open up to questions from the audience.
Just so you know, I'm a ringer. I'm the chair of the neuroscience department at Virginia Tech. So how much did you actually learn about the brain and the idea of hallucinations and what's happening in the brain to sort of get a contrast between how we perceive things when we're conscious and the idea of what each individual sees or senses when they're not conscious? I'm not brain dead, by the way.
Well, Adam's brother is an emergency room doctor here at Pittsfield, and came and spoke to us about arterial venous malformation and the causes and effects and all of that stuff. So we had sort of like a science lesson about it.
He brought some textbooks, and it was very gross.
With pictures.
I couldn't look at some of the pictures.
Yeah. So, yeah, but the sort of other part of your question, I think it's personal for everybody. Yeah, I don't know that I could spell it out, but, you know, that whole what happens when you're brain dead and what you see and when you're under anesthesia and what you remember and what you don't, I think that's a whole other kettle of fish.
Quick anecdote. When Adam's brother and other brother, non-doctor brother, came to see the show a couple of nights ago,
Yeah.
During arterial venous malformation, when the doctor and the nurse are singing into each other's faces, Adam's older brother leaned over to the doctor brother and was like, "That's fake, right?"
I just wanted to say sailing was amazing and so beautiful. I loved the shower curtain. And I wanted to ask also, you know, at one point it said, in Gordon's brain during a coma, and but sometimes it wasn't so clear about what was in his brain and what was not. And how much did you want us to sort of know what was what, and how much did you want to keep us guessing?
Me personally, or like, because I think the idea is like sometimes it gets blurred, because this is all from Gordo's point of view, right? And so sometimes reality can blur into, you know, your subconscious a little bit. And so I think one of the things that I love the most, and you know, during tech, I was able to sit out in the audience a little bit because I'm not in like a lot of the numbers, and I got to sit out and kind of watch how some of these wacky moments kind of play out, you know, on stage. And I thought, you know, that is specifically what you're asking. It's done so well to me. I feel like it blends so well. There are moments where, you know, Mary and I and Dorcas are having this really serious conversation about, like, you know, what's going to happen to him. And then Damon, out of nowhere, just starts singing as a minister this random thing that feels so out of place, but it just kind of works. So I guess the answer to your question is, it may be personal for you. It may be personal, like what you see as reality and what you see as like some part of his imagination. I think that ultimately the idea is that we are able to experience all those emotions, whether they're real or not.
So I haven't heard the various interviews, and this is to Mary Testa. I'm a huge fan of yours, and I saw you in the original as the homeless
you very
woman.
much.
So it's
Thank you.
you're just amazing.
Oh, you're very
He
sweet.
said I have to have a question, so I don't really have a question mark, except you're amazing.
Oh, you're very nice, thank you. I think this is an amazing cast.
Yeah, this is an amazing cast. This is incredible. Incredible production. Well, here's a question mark. So Anytime was actually written for elegies, I think, right?
No, it was written for, it
was
was
written for this?
in the original New Brain for a minute. And I honestly don't remember why they cut it. I wasn't in on the meeting. So I'm
It's
sure it
definitely
was,
also in elegies.
yeah, I'm sure he put it in
Yeah.
elegies, but it wasn't written for elegies.
All right, that was my question, okay? I just really wanted to tell you how fantastic.
Thank you, I appreciate that, thank you.
Oh, how is it different being this role than that role?
It's very emotional for me this time, because Bill Finn and I have been friends for almost 50 years, and I was there. I've said this many times, but I was there when he went through all this stuff. So to play, and I knew his mother personally, so to play this time is very emotional for me, because I see Bill. Bill has come a few times, and he came to opening night, and he's enormously happy with this, but he's had some medical challenges. So to see that and to be with him and all of that, it's very heartfelt for me.
Yeah, I also saw the original and many productions thereafter, and I'm wondering if you have thoughts on how the critics have just grown to love this more and more, which wasn't the case when it first opened.
Yeah,
Your
that's right.
thoughts about that?
I don't have a comment about critics, because you never know how someone's gonna react. But I do remember that, at that time I was reading reviews. I don't read them anymore, but I was kind of dumbfounded that they didn't like it as, they were like, well, should be a review, it's not really a show, kind of thing. That's what I remember from. Who knows? I mean, people live their lives, shit happens, everyone loses someone, everyone goes through this stuff, almost everyone has had an MRI, you know what I mean? Everybody has dealt with life, and I think the more you live, the more this resonates, this show, That's my supposition.
So, I know that any performance like this is really a work of art and not supposed to be factually based, but it is based somewhat as a memoir. And to me, it was very interesting, this dilemma that Gordon faces on his last night, that he thinks may be his last night, whether to have the comfort of his partner, the intimacy and the soothing, or to finish his work. And I'm wondering what that was like, that dilemma that people were, that he was facing, how just the thought of balancing those two tensions.
So I think of Roger as a person that frequently gets what he wants. And so I think in that moment where there's like a little tug of war with him as an actor, I feel like he feels like there should be some point where he decides that living his life right now is more important than the work that he's been doing. But I do think also that, after they get into that little argument, he explains himself a little bit more. Not that he necessarily should have to, but he does. He explains himself a little bit more, and I feel that Roger starts to understand. I thought he goes, this is a person that I've been with for quite a while, and I understand how he is and what he thinks, and I know he loves me, but I also know that he loves his work, and I know that if this is his last night on earth, he wants something that he can be remembered by. And although we could share this really nice, romantic, moment, I think it's not necessarily that it's more important to him, but I think it's something that could last longer for him. And I think that's the type of person he is. So me as an actor, I kind of give into that moment a little bit, and I say, you know what, I love you, and if that's what you want in this moment, I'm just gonna support you.
It's a good question, though. It's a really interesting question because it's the soul of an artist, and how important that is for all of us, I think, as artists, to, I don't know about make a lasting statement, but to be in our art. And I think that's a very interesting question. It's an interesting conundrum, you know.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you everyone for
Thank
surrounding.
you, everyone.